Hello and welcome to Roundtable number 25 of Dualistic Unity. I am getting a good taste for another reminder that, you can go through loads and loads of shit, feel like you're regressing, feel like going back and all this stuff. And then eventually, insights are had, some things are realized, you realize that you don't have to focus on all the things that seemed so vital and important, all those thoughts, all those fears, all those concerns. And yet focusing on them allowed me to gain so much perspective of all that I am and learn so much and gain so much more empathy for certain things. And so you go through something, you're like, oh yeah, again, going through something I thought was going to last forever. I thought it was going to be this terrible thing that was this huge setback. I lost all of my progress, and it never is. And there's always things going on that you couldn't even possibly wrap your head around. So, long story short, I don't know what's happening, and I'm getting more and more willing to continue on despite feeling like I know less and less.
And that is why all I want to do is encourage you, not just Andrew, but you, the listener. I want to encourage you to continue to try, to continue to do things, continue to throw yourself in or jump or make a leap of faith or whatever it is, however you want to describe it. Keep doing. And in doing and failing and getting disappointed and getting frustrated and beating yourself up and going through all of that, eventually you will learn that you can do and that it means nothing about you. But the sheer act of doing without worrying about what it means about you is the freedom that you're looking for. But the only way to get there is to keep doing.
So keep on doing. And with all of that said, I hope you enjoy this live stream that is Roundtable number 25 of Dualistic Unity.
And here we are for Roundtable number 25. I am very excited about this. 25 roundtables. Wow. I remember when we started these, was it over a year ago or so? I think it was a while ago. And I think Maddie was in one of our first original roundtables as well. It's been such a long journey. And again, so reflective of the community in itself, because I know a lot of the people here at one point just came to a Patreon group and we're kind of like, what's this all about? I've been listening to the podcast, heard some shit I like, had some questions, and I wanted to share some stuff. And now they're active members of the community. In Jazz's case, our Discord administrator now, which is fantastic. For anybody who hasn't checked out our community Discord, please do. You can find it at dualisticunity.com and just click on community and the navigation bar to go straight to it. There's no charge. It's free, of course. And we have over 1,000 members now, I believe, that are just looking to have this discussion. What discussion? Any goddamn discussion about life, about being you, about why it's so hard to just relax and then recognizing that it's not. We just make a lot of excuses not to. We make a lot of assumptions that we can't. And so this is going to be a fun conversation, a fun roundtable. We still have a few people, as I said, that will be joining us in the next few minutes, one of which just came in, Jackie. Jackie is now a co-host here at Dualistic Unity. She will be joining us in season 6 with her own segment, co-starring Amanda, of course, as well as a live show called Dualistic Unity Real. So everybody should keep an eye out for that, as that's going to be awesome. I'm going to stop rambling now and pass it over to Andrew.
Yeah, I was going to say Jazz are far more active administrator in the Discord, as I got noticed getting called out this morning. I'm in there. Don't worry. I'm reading and reacting, and yeah, it's and I'm getting that's another thing that I didn't look at. Like, so many things have been coming up in the last week or two, 3 weeks. Yeah, just like things that I've suppressed or avoided and not want to look at, and then just like and being able to dig into certain things and just take like a couple minutes and do something, right? Like, I always would make it into this thing into my head, like with so many situations, more so that I used to with, an upcoming situation. I would turn it into this whole thing, make it into this whole goddamn thing. And it was never the thing that I had in my head. And it never is the thing that you have in your head. And then the more you're willing to look at those situations, right? The ones where it's like feels so big, and then you actually look at it, or then you actually do it, and you're like, oh fuck, that was not That was not the thing I had in my head at all. And I can just do little bits of things here and there. And I can just, jump in to a situation without any idea of how it may be or how it may go, and just find out what I'm capable of. Because who the fuck is to say that me showing up to something, that anyone showing up to anything can't be equally as great at doing the thing as if they were to mull over it for 17 days straight, wondering about how it was going to go. Like with everything, like it's going to go how it goes. I saw actually a Kobe Bryant, little, he was getting interviewed talking about doubt and how silly it is. Like you can spend time doubting yourself. You do something, either it goes great, say for a game, like you either win the game or you lose the game. The next day you get up and you do things again. It's like doubt doesn't have to be a relevant component to our experience. Like it's going to go how it goes, whether you're doubting yourself or whether you're not doubting yourself. Doubting ourselves is just like a familiar way to do something, just like not to do something beneficial, just to do something, period, just to mull over something, period. And so it was just an interesting perspective. I thought about it before, but just how silly it is. It's like you're still going to do it. It's still going to happen. So you might as well, I don't know, you're probably better off if you don't doubt yourself, right? And you're actually there in the situation. But it's it's familiar and habitual, but yet still just happening right now if it is. So anyway, Jazz, hello, welcome. Great to see you, fellow blue lettered name person.
That is awesome. I was so surprised to see you on the Discord server today. I was totally calling you out, and then you just respond with like, I'm here, I'm watching, I'm lurking. And that was hilarious. My jaw literally dropped as I read that message. No, but yeah, I was resonating with what you were saying, Andrew, about doubt, because I've been recognizing, especially over the past week, as I was processing whatever I was processing, especially in regards to the Discord, but also other parts of my life, about how much I have doubted myself while I was doing it. And something that I was just thinking about this morning was like, who would I be without my fear? And just the answer is myself. Like, I would just be myself. Like I wouldn't need to think so much about exactly how things needed to go, or that I had any idea of what the right way for things to go is, and that all of this is just God playing. Like when you realize that all of this can be just play, or when you question why is this not play? Like why is this so stressful right now? Like I have been noticing how much I have used so many different types of distractions to get away from how I was feeling right now. And I have been noticing through this quote unquote journey is that I have been using those distractions less and less. And so for the past few days, I've just been like, honestly, not picking up my phone basically ever. Like maybe like I will pick it up only for the intended purpose that I have. But I was noticing how there were habitual tendencies where I was just picking it up as soon as I was feeling something that didn't want to feel. And I was noticing how much, okay, so I was noticing that I can just sit through the feeling and I don't need to label it. A lot of perceptions will occur as I feel this feeling, and it may like I may like process something and it'll add to the process of whatever is happening. So it was just very interesting to sit through that. And as I was recognizing that I didn't need to judge any of the experience. Like there's no like good or bad experience. It's just what is. I don't need for things to be pleasant necessarily. I was recognizing how it was just processing and I was just sitting through a lot of it and it was bringing up a lot of stuff for me and it was honestly amazing because I was recognizing just how much I try to run away from things that I don't need to run away from. Like I can just sit wherever I am without any ideas of what a good or bad experience looks like. Because I think a lot of what my running away and distraction was about was this idea that, oh fuck, we're like not gonna have a good experience right now. So let's just like find whatever we can to distract ourselves from whatever we're gonna be feeling now. But as I was recognizing that I don't need to have a preference over whatever is happening. I can just sit the millions of perceptions that I'm feeling in all moments, and recognize that none of them have to mean anything about me. And as I recognize that there is no good or bad, then I recognize that I can just play around. Like, I don't need to worry so much about all these different choices I have, because I thought that maybe if I think about it enough, then I will find the right choice here. Or if I doubt myself or something like that, if I think about this enough, then I will find the right thing that I want to do right now. But I think, as everyone who has gone through that process enough times will have noticed, is that you will always find reasons for why all of them are good options, and there's no right or wrong. And as you let go of defining yourself by how success is measured, or how you're perceiving yourself in terms of what you need to be doing, in terms of you think you need to be doing the right thing. So you have an idea of what the right thing is, and now you're going to enforce yourself to be doing it. So that's double wham. But as you recognize that you don't know, like I've been saying that to myself so much lately, I don't know, because it just like instantly drops my ego from like attaching to anything, any perception that I just processed. And it's so funny, that feeling that I feel as well. As soon as I say I don't know, it's like, oh, it just brings me down back to what is happening, keeps me questioning, keeps me honest about the fact that I really don't know. And I used to get so scared by all these different options that I would be seeing, that I can go in any different direction now, because I was like, okay, so which one is the right way? But now that I'm recognizing all of them are ways, that's it. Then I can recognize that I can just pick one, go, see what happens, learn from it. And that's where I don't need as much self-doubt in the process, because all that doubt was doing was like protecting me from all of that. But I don't need to be protected from so much of what I am, because I'm just allowing myself to be myself. Like, I don't need to run away to my phone all the time, or anything, or any perception. Or like, I was noticing how I would attach to certain perceptions as well of myself as a way to cope with what I was feeling in the moment. And it's like, no, I don't know. I don't know anything, and I can just, that's okay. That's really okay. And that's where that's where I feel like I'm allowing myself to play, and to not feel like I have to do anything in any particular way. Like, I can slow down my words right now, because that's what I've been doing something lately. And it's only because I can only do that because I'm like not attaching to any idea of how this should go, which I find pretty awesome, is that freedom to be able to play with words, with whatever, with Discord, with friends, talk, hang out, enjoy, without feeling like I need to be doubting myself through the process, and feeling like I need to know how I'm being perceived, how this is being looked at, as if I could ever fucking know.
That's awesome. That's exactly it. And all of a sudden you're more sensitive. Like, there's more of a dance that happens. You're talking to people, and it's very much like playing ping pong. You're like, right. And it's just, it is more of a game, because it's not something you need to do now in order to fit in. It's not a requirement. It's not something that you can fail, really. I mean, that's the wonderful part about understanding that you can't control how people perceive you, is that you can walk into a situation and just cluck like a duck and walk the fuck away, and nobody's going to know what to do with that. This is the Zen thing this is a story in Zen that I love. Is there's this class happening, and the Zen master is at the front of the class, and the student stands up and he just takes his fan with a flourish and he snaps it down on the table and he walks the fuck out of the class. And the master's just like, yeah. He was like, that's exactly the point right there, because the whole thing was, there's nothing to learn. And the student picked it up. There's nothing to learn. I do whatever the fuck I want. And he just left. And that is Zen.
Oh man, and how often we hold on to, oh, there's got to be some right way, and like even in the immediacy, like a thing I noticed that I do a bunch was keep my notepad next to me and like write down things as like someone will be talking, because I'll settle upon this idea that like, oh, here's a thought, here's an insight about this is going to be the best thing to respond with, despite them continuing to talk. So it's like, all right, just jot down like a word or something, even just a word, just something. But it was still something that I was more or less prioritizing over paying attention, because there was, despite it being maybe just one little word, it was still a prioritization of my response being the best response, me somehow fucking knowing that this was going to be the best response or one of the best responses. And so I stopped. Like, I'll still have my notebook next to me just in case there's something, like, mostly for things to remember for later. Like, if Ray and I are talking before, I'll like jot down mostly for that. And like, I avoid using it. Like, I avoid writing things down. And I've been doing that for like a month now. And there was a bit where I was like getting very overwhelmed. Like, there was one of the fucking calls, I think it was last Wednesday. I was like basically in a fog the whole time. And I was just so overly, like, I had some really, really deep insecurity shit coming up that was just almost felt like I was in a dark cloud. And it's like, and a part of it was because it was because I recognized how much of crutch that thing I was using, like the notes were, but then it allowed those things to almost come up, because even though I was feeling certain things like, oh God, what if I forget what I say? I can't get a point across. I can't articulate something well. And so like, there was just, oh my God, I was so tense that like my hands were kind of like curling, and I was like, fuck, am I losing control of my hand? Then I was getting stressed about that. Like, all this shit, all this deep shit, but I still wasn't jotting down, like using my notes as much. And and because I wasn't going back to that, it was like that thing was able to come up, and then I could realize like, oh, me being so concerned about, say, for example, when someone's talking, me not hearing them, that letting go of that, like being focused on that, is actually a ton of noise in the way of me hearing what they're doing. And so I've kind of switched it from, oh, I hope I don't forget what they're saying, even just like in the short term little reminder, like, I hope I do forget. I'm going to try and be clouded with thoughts. I hope I'm clouded with thoughts right now. And then all the resistance kind of goes away, and it almost immediately like clears the air a bit. Or for anything that I'm fighting, like, oh, I'm really lost in thought right now, if I switch it to just like, I want to be lost in thought right now, I want to be just overcome with thought, then there's not the fight anymore, because that's the thing that's always very much in the way. I would have never been able to recognize that if I kept using my notes as often as I was. Like, you go back a year ago to some of my note pages from like an episode or something, it is covered in just random ass words. I was just putting all of the thoughts out there just in case I could reference, because, by the end of it, what if I don't have anything to say at the very end? And then, then I won't know. And so it's just interesting how, because I recognized that and was willing to let that go, like some deep shit came up and it was uncomfortable as fuck. Like, it was one of the most uncomfortable things. And a big part was like, fuck, I've been doing this for 2 years. And like, I feel like I'm back to being, 15 again. And then I was able to realize some things from that. And now I don't need it as much. And I'm able to pay attention, and actually pay attention, because there was attention getting cut from the conversations, and I was missing certain things as I was jotting things down, despite having that trade-off. Like, it would be better to do that, as if, again, to your point, Jazz, I could ever have any idea what the right thing to say is. Now I'm just like, yeah, I don't know the right thing to say. If something comes to me at the end, cool. If not, cool. Like, you can't fail. You can't do something wrong. You're just here going about living life, God playing. So yeah, definitely resonate with that shift.
Okay, good to see you.
Hey guys, hey everybody, good to see you too. I highly resonate with basically that whole description of the storm, the thought, emotion, kind of body, mind, the whole storm. Like, and I've been there, and like when I kind of recognize it, like now that I am aware, I can like actually look at that stuff as it's happening and sort of end it. Like, it's almost immediate, like the ending of it, once I look at it and fully accept it. And that actually is happening to me today. I had a pretty sort of just one of those times going on, just like that basically. And it was like I'm riding my bike here, and I'm like, I noticed I'm not even like actually seeing like where I'm going, because there was so much cloud going on, basically my vision just came right back to focus, whoop, just like that. And here I am. And I had just the awareness to know that in this moment I can choose how to respond, and it's really invaluable to waste our time just to kind of sort of focus on those areas of doubt like Jazz was talking about, or the areas of times where I'm like spacing out and things like that. You know what I mean? Like those times or to think to write a note down, it's really about almost like I'm thinking of it in case of like, just moment management, like, and I'm a former culprit of that too. And it still happens to me sometimes where we'll be in these groups and stuff, and I'll be like trying to formulate like the best thing to say about this and that. And, and it just, in the meantime, I'm actually missing the current conversation that's going on, first of all, and then I snap back into it, and then I gotta kind of find out if that is even relevant anymore. And then next thing you know, it turns into this back and forth thing, and I'm not even like sure if I even want to talk anymore. I got my hand up, you're like, okay, it just, eventually you just got to be like, that doesn't make any sense, and just focus and like pay attention, and let go of the need to like have anything good to say, like, and like you guys have been talking about that for a long time, and it really, with practice, is like, it's really something else. You know what I mean? Like my attention level now is just so much better, like way improved. I'm not perfect by any means, but that's okay. I do my best moment to moment to moment, so it's really cool. So I totally resonate with all this stuff for sure. Yeah, that's all I got.
Yeah, no, it's so funny how counterintuitive it is. Like something that hits me sometimes, like, oh, I hope I don't forget this thought, or I hope I remember what to say or have something to say. I hope I have something to say. And then when I just like even just switching that for a second to like, I hope I don't have anything to say. I hope I completely forget what I'm saying. Like it's so funny how I always have settled upon that side. Like, I hope this doesn't happen. I hope this doesn't happen. I hope that doesn't happen. It's like, according to what thing? And it's just like, whatever it is, like, that's what any thought, fear thing that comes up is, just a means of distraction from me right now, from here and now. It's like, yeah, there's processes going on, looking at processes. There's certain things that come up that are deeper. Like, you have the opportunity to look at and see something a little bit differently. But all the time, all of those thoughts going on, all of the things like, oh, I hope this doesn't happen, I hope that doesn't happen, like, they're all just distractions from this right now. That's and realizing that, like, oh, so there's no way that could be as important as this that's going on right now. I think I've given that distraction so much importance. Like, it is vital to look at, it's valuable to look at, it's important to look at and keep in mind, to have some thoughts, some idea of what's going on right now. But if you have an idea of what's going on, guess what? That's not what's going on. It's an idea of what's going on. It's not what's going on ever. Like, holy fuck. That's funny. Oh my God. If you have an idea of what's happening, oh, I gotta gain an awareness of the situation that's going on. Like, awareness of the situation, attention of the situation, an idea of the situation, not the situation at all. That's going to be so curated, so biased based on all the experiences you've had, all the perspectives you hold on to, all the truths and beliefs that you maintain, that it's not even going to be as close to the situation that's actually happening. So having no idea of the situation allows you to actually see the situation, right? It's funny.
It's the only way to see the situation, because otherwise you're looking for something that either you're afraid of or desire. That's the difficult part about that, is you have to let go of what you want to see. And this is what I've said about people often, is that in not wanting to see anything in people, I've had way more sensitivity for who they are from moment to moment, because I'm not trying to look at them a certain way. I'm most importantly not trying to look at them as me. Because as soon as you're trying to look at them as you, that's based on an idea of yourself, and that's not you. So it's really finding that lack of concept that is the reality underneath all that. So like, when you're looking at them, you're not looking at them in the same way that they're not looking at you. It's a very different perception. It's just letting it all go. That said, Jackie, hello.
Sup, fuckers?
Indeed.
I have absolutely nothing in the tank right now, but that's kind of the point, right? So I'm kind of seeing like raising my hand in these conversations, not as like, oh, I have something to say, rather than like, do I want to throw myself off a cliff and see how that goes? And it's fun when I do it. And yeah, totally. It's just our lack of faith comes up in every single fucking moment in ourselves. Otherwise, we're doing fine. We're here. We're talking. And I don't know why we get so fucking afraid of something as minuscule and insignificant as like forgetting what we're going to say having such a big effect on our lives at all. And this was coming up for me a bunch in the episode we recorded yesterday. And I was noticing myself so many times, like throughout the conversation, being like, is he going to pass it to me? What am I going to say? Like, do I have an analogy? Like, and it was just getting in the way of my ability to concentrate. So I had to keep bringing myself back to like, fuck, you don't know. And that, like Jazz was saying, like, that's just like my mantra, just fucking, I don't know, over and over, constantly in every situation in my life. That's the best way to fucking stay present. But yeah, it's just settling on all these certainties about how we think the conversation is going, when in reality, every single person here is having a completely different perspective. Everybody who listens to this episode is going to interpret it completely differently. And I just can't know. But we want to so bad, so bad. But yeah, that's all I really had to say there. This is just a great exercise of just saying fuck it and seeing what happens. And it's so weird that there's so much pressure when it's being recorded or like when it's in a digital medium, as opposed to like in person. If you say something, it's just going to go away instantly, like once that moment is over. So there's not this pressure. Whereas like when it's being recorded, it's like, oh no, like people can come back to this forever. And that's something I struggle with like posting content too. It's like, if I post this, it's here for people to see forever. And like, even if I do grow and change, like people can still see this version of me and judge me based on it. And it's just crazy how I just bully myself constantly into stagnation. But yeah, I love what you said, Andrew, about just like hoping you fuck up. I'm going to start doing that. Just like, I hope I completely forget what I'm going to say in the middle of my sentence. Because yeah, it's like putting yourself in that double bind. It comes back to that paradox of like, you can't try to relax. You just have to fucking do it. So it's just like, yeah, we'll just see how this goes. Always.
Absolutely. Just deconstruct and carry on, because that's really all it is. It's like, I hope to fuck up. It's like, well, what does that mean? What is a fuck up exactly? What is a success exactly? Like, exactly how deeply are you looking into this? Because it makes a difference, right? It's like the idea of failure. It's only a failure if you look at it in a very narrow perspective. Because if you look at it as a step along the path to quote unquote success, then it was in fact all one long string of success. There wasn't a single failure in there that wasn't necessary in order to succeed. So it was all just success happening in the long term, right? So if you're like, well, I hope I fuck up, you're really just saying there's no such thing as not fucking up, really. Like, what do you mean by fucking up? What are you expecting to be? What are you expecting to do? All of it is just nonsense. It's just fucking nonsense. It's just us desperately hoping we have value. And it's not even a question until we ask it. That's it. It's like, hey, I'm going to sit down. This is what I love about dualistic unity. And it's the reason that I think it's so important that this be communicated to people, that it's not a podcast. It's an exercise in just fucking letting go and talking about the process of letting go. It's not about not facing challenges. We're not telling you how to get rich. We're not telling you how to find God. We're not telling you anything. We're just talking to you about all the shit we hold on to because we think it's helping. And in that, the community is growing. People are changing their discussions. They're having a different impact on their life. And that's really what's happening. That's all that's happening. It's just that we're expressing that you can let go. And if you want to, you can come and join us on a group call. If you want to, you can come and join us on a round table. And, eventually you might even want to be a guest, in which case, let's talk about that shit. We can definitely make that happen at some point on some aspect of dualistic unity. We have so much. Maybe we'll have you on a call-in show. Maybe we'll have you on a round table or something like that. But the point is that if you want to talk, we want to hear, because you are just as much a part of the process as we are. So if there's anything that you're going to do with your $5 a month, join us on Patreon. Why the fuck not? Because even if you can't make it to the calls, you can watch the videos of those calls afterwards. Maybe next season we'll have a different schedule. Maybe you'll be able to get in on there, but there's a community there. And why not support that community if it's something that you yourself are struggling with, if it's something that you yourself want to see people succeed in, and just pushing past their doubts and their fears? What better thing to support if it's something that you want to experience yourself? Because what you focus on grows. I mean that. It really is just that. You might not think it makes a big difference, but it does, because it's a focus to you. You're establishing a priority in your life. So one way or another, join the community, jump on a Discord, join us during one of our social shows in the chat section. One way or another, you're making a ripple. And I want to address this quickly before I pass it on to Maddie. Well, Andrew first, sorry, buddy. Just the idea that what we're saying, just because it's recorded, has somewhat less of a ripple. It has the same ripple. It's just more visible now, right? Because a conversation you had 10 years ago with whoever you had it changed their life and changed everything they said after that. That ripple exists forever, and you can remember it, right? So it's in there forever. It's just that the digital copy just makes it a little bit more obvious that it's there forever, right? That there will always be ripples, and perhaps even more ripples because of it. And I do enjoy that. But if we're going to do that, then we got to give a shout out to the Bible for keeping the ripple of Jesus going, right?
That thing's been rippling for, arguably too long. Not too long. Yeah, it's been rippling as it's been rippling. But it's funny because Jackie, when he said that, I had totally forgotten that this was a roundtable, not a Patreon call for a couple minutes there. And I was like, oh, fuck, we are recording, because it starts to it doesn't, I don't know. I guess the more you do something, the less there's a difference between one thing or another. And with these calls even, and doing podcasts, and I know you're getting into podcasting now. Woo, fuck yeah. It's just like doing something over and over and over. It's not, it doesn't become as much of a thing. And especially the beauty of this is when I was younger, if I had any sort of recorded call, public call, anything like that, there would be things that I would focus on for a week thinking about it, at least sometimes a month, if I had that much buildup time without anything that I was necessarily afraid of in the way, in between it. And the beauty of this is the most amount of time I could spend focusing on something is a couple hours in between certain things, because there's just so many things going on. And so the more you're willing to just continue to jump in, continue to do things, it decreases almost the amount of you did notice that. It's I wonder if that came through, because I don't think I really heard much, because I can't hear myself super well through my headphones. But yeah, as I'm talking more, and I've been talking more, my fucking voice from Saturday is still fucking fucked up. Sounded like I sucked a bag of dicks over here, but it's all good. But anyway, so yeah, throwing yourself in is fun. And that's why we have no issue with just passing to someone, or someone who drops their hand and telling them, nope, you're in it. Because no one gives a fuck if someone's oh, I didn't remember what to say. Well, you got something to say now. And just being willing to jump in, because this whole idea of there being, there has to be, sure, there's a flow to conversations and whatnot, but the flow is you. And so if you have certain thoughts that come up, or insights, or something else, a different way you want to take a conversation, that's just as valid as responding immediately to the thing that's right there. So there's no right way to do it. And if there's no right way to do it, there's no wrong way to do it. And so, yeah, just keep jumping in and keep finding out. And the less crutches you have along the way, or familiar things that you hold on to as you go, the more willing you are to find out what you're capable of, and find out what that, what being yourself really is, because that's what you're going through as you're willing to just jump in without so much, regard for how you're going to do or how it's going to go, because it's irrelevant anyway. You can't know, right? You can't know how you're doing. You can't know how a conversation's going. You can't know how your life is going. So you might as well just keep on going through it and continuing to find out what you're capable of. Maddie. Yo.
Hey everyone. I love this theme of letting go of hope and just this discussion of doubt and throwing yourself into the fire and just having that faith within yourself, because you don't know how it's ever going to go. You don't know what you're going to say in the moment, but all you can do is just do it and see what happens. And holding on to this idea, or like to think that we can prepare, is almost like putting a leash on yourself, and you're kind of like holding yourself back in a way. Or like, as everyone was talking, because I wanted, like when Jackie said, yeah, I'm just going to throw myself off a cliff, I was like, okay, I'll throw myself into the fire as well, and like we'll just see how it goes, instead of trying to hold on to this idea of what I'm going to say, and like mini preparing myself in the background. And it's like, well, we can, but like it may not even come out the way that we want it to, or the way we think we want it to. And why do we think that this is like what we're thinking of saying is going to be the best way of saying it? Like, why are we measuring ourselves in this moment? Like, stop measuring yourself and just do, and just let go and really see what just comes out of it. And we never know how anybody else is perceiving us. And like, I'm just talking to myself all the time. The recognition of that is just, it's kind of going back and forth as I kind of like get lost, and then but I'm allowing myself to get lost, instead of like trying to just, it's almost like extra effort in not trying to get lost, but just allowing myself and having that faith that, yeah, I am going to come back and I'm going to come out of it. And it's been a different experience lately. But and even like as I'm talking, like I'm trying to remember what I was going to say previously, and it's like, just let go of that and just kind of listen to what is coming out now. And hey Amanda, and yeah, it's just the more I recognize that I'm just talking to myself, the more I feel that I have more grace for myself, or empathy for myself. Or it's like, it's it's almost like I'm being softer towards myself and all of these other versions of me. And I just kind of yeah, like I'm not being so hard on myself, as well as like having that attitude towards other people, or like even animals. I feel that my soft is or my touch is softer, or my approach is, it just feels like I'm kind of relaxing into empathy. And it's just been really nice. And just kind of sitting back, and like, even when not interpreting facial expressions, or trying to think that I could know what this means, because I don't know what anything means. I mean, I can assign meaning, but it probably is never like what it's never what I think it is. So yeah, it's just been I've just been really enjoying where I am right now, and really just kind of relaxing into it, not trying to be anywhere other than where I am. And Yeah.
Yeah. And now we have this perspective of ourselves or certain things that we don't like about ourselves and assume that, oh, everyone else must not like that also. Just because I don't like something that I've done or think I messed something up doesn't mean that anyone else saw it that way either. Like I have one little finite, unique perspective of things. There's no guarantee of anything beyond that whatsoever, but I'll avoid the things that I don't like, that I feel uncomfortable doing, that I blah, 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 me. I don't know. I don't know how that's going to be perceived or looked at, or maybe, me jumping into something, you jumping into something and falling on your face. Like that's going to be far more inspiring than you landing on both feet, being like, oh, look at me. I just did that perfectly. Nah, who's that? Who's that so good for? Right? What good does that really do at the end of the day, besides make you just feel a little bit better?
Right. And again, that's why we enjoy the challenge here on Dualistic Unity. I want to make a quick announcement before I pass it on, because we do enjoy the challenge and it's been quite some time since we've done one of these. I figured, what the fuck? Why not? It's time for a new community topics episode. So anybody who is familiar with the community topics episodes know that at one point we used to just have the community suggest different topics and then have the community vote on those topics and then read it about an hour before we recorded the episode and then just fucking wing it. And we've recorded 39 episodes, 38 of which are online. The 39th one is being edited right now. And this is going to be episode 40, I believe, in the community topics series. So I'm very excited. So this is how you play. If you would like to suggest a new topic, go to the community topics channel on our Discord. You can find it very easily and then just put a topic, just say, I'm suggesting this. And then Andrew or I will consolidate all of the suggestions, the ones that haven't been covered, because again, we've covered quite a bit. And then we'll put up a poll and you can vote on what we're going to cover next. And we will read it the morning of, and then we will fucking wing it and see how it goes. So make it challenging, make it good. Don't make it one of those things that's just, nonsensical. Make it deep. Make it something that we can really deep dive on, other than just something that's kind of, it'd be kind of neat and kind of cool. Like make it applicable, make it challenging. And that's all I'm going to throw out there. And I just wanted to mention that. And now I'm going to pass it over to Jazz.
Hell yeah, that's awesome. I'm looking forward to this. The community topics episodes are awesome. I was thinking back just right now to one of the, I think, personality tests that you guys did. And I think in the episode, you guys had an idea of doing a follow-up a year later. I don't know if it has been a year. I don't know when that episode was published at all. But yeah, that would be really interesting to see a follow-up on the personality episode. And
that's a dope idea. That's great.
Yeah, I would love to see that. Personality itself in general is so interesting, right? Because I was noticing how when I did the personality test, when that episode was aired, how different the results I got were in comparison to like 2 years before that. And I'm pretty confident that now I would also rate more introverted than I ever did. I used to be like 75-80% extroverted, which was in my case another way of saying I needed people around me to enjoy my time. And now that I'm like enjoying my time just by myself, it's been easier to have that while also enjoying people's company. But in regards to actually hanging out with people now, what I've been noticing a lot lately is just how much more free I'm feeling in regards to expressing myself. Like I've just let go at this point. I'm just like, whenever I'm out with friends, I'm just saying whatever the hell is coming out, honestly. And a lot of times I'll notice how uncomfortable it makes people, because I'm just like saying stuff that I never used to say before, but it honestly makes me think and makes everyone else think as well. And I can see how uncomfortable they're getting. And yeah, so that's been really interesting. But I think it's been really nice because I've been noticing how many programs I had playing in my head of what how things needed to go, or what I thought I needed to say, or all these things, all these ideas about what I think I need to say, or what I think I need to be, how do I need to be perceived, all these programs that are just playing and taking my attention away from what is happening. And like Andrew said, like it's not the idea, it's really being here without feeling like you need to have an idea to hold on to of how you're being perceived. And when you recognize that, first, you don't know how you're being perceived, and second, when you let go of the idea that any perception of you is a more positive, quote unquote, perception of you, and it's all just like ways of looking at you, and there's no better or worse way, then you can sit in that and just be yourself and feel like just say whatever you want to say and not not conform to any idea of what you feel like you need to be in that situation. And I find it so funny how we use these thoughts as measurements of our intelligence. Like we use ideas that we learn and knowledge and amass these thoughts of how we're going to plan and make sure that things go right. And if I think about this long enough and do some enough thinking about this, then I will know what the right thing to do here is, what the optimal thing to do here is. I know I can optimize reality based on these programs that I have running, but the more programs that I'm closing down, the more I'm realizing that there was never a way to optimize, and there doesn't need to be one. When you recognize that you can just be wherever you're at without feeling like there is anything better to be at, like there's no better place to be than exactly here. And if you feel like there is, then you would be scared of just like expressing yourself and being yourself because you feel like you're being judged, like because you are judging yourself. As you feel this fear of the judgment, as you feel the fear of the judgment, you will perceive that judgment as well. And what I've been noticing lately is I've been more willing to look at stuff I've said on episodes as before, like just listen back to myself, which I never used to do before. But after the call-in show, I thought it was appropriate to go back and see just that process play out a few more times in my case. And I didn't feel like that judgment was there as much anymore because I had no need to perceive myself in any particular way as a smart individual who's beautiful, or I don't know, whatever ideas I've tried to maintain of myself. And it's just playing out. And yeah, it's been really nice to just feel like I don't need to hold on to all of those ideas anymore. And so with that comes the freedom to just expression, unfiltered expression, real expression, uncircumcised expression.
Raw and uncut.
That
Best kind.
It's funny.
It's a matter of
It's
preference.
funny. That joke was in my head at some point over the past, like, I don't know, week. Like it came into my head and I was like, that's funny. And then and then it came out again. I just love how that happens. When you don't feel like you need, and you don't need to be anywhere other than exactly here, then things are like, it's just play, like I love how we feel like we have to maintain some kind of memory as to what thing do I need to say now, and then maintain this memory in our hard disk and make sure that we're just constantly accessing our hard disk and making sure that we know how we need to respond in any particular way after whatever is said. But the more we recognize that we don't need to, and that's where intelligence comes from, is when you're really paying attention and then just responding out of whatever words are coming out after that, because all the thoughts in your head are just like processes that are unfolding, and you don't need to necessarily go in there and hold on to any one of them, especially not necessarily if they're making you just feel good. Like that's all they're doing, is making you feel good. And you can just let go of all of them and just be here where you're at, and then just say whatever you're going to say, and things just come in as you're speaking. They just filter through as you're speaking, and then you're just able to process in real time. Because something I've been noticing lately is how I felt like I need to share a snapshot of the oh my god, that's so interesting, that word, because that word I think was used on the call-in show as I rewatched it. But I have been feeling like I had to maintain the snapshot of what the process looked like, and that requires some idea of how it will be perceived as well. Like, okay, the snapshot is a good way of perceiving it. I don't know that this is a good way of perceiving it, for a million people, it'll be a million different ways of perceiving it. And for some, it'll be good, and for some, it'll be bad. But what I was recognizing through this entire process was how much of a need I was feeling to make sure that I did have some sort of idea of how it was being perceived in terms of whether it would keep people around me or not, because I felt like I did have this need to keep people around me. And yeah, that was playing out a lot over the past few days, especially. I might share more details on the Patreon call if I end up joining that. But yeah, it's just been really interesting to see how I don't need to be anyone. I don't have any certainty over who stays and who goes, and I don't need to either. And I also don't need to for any relationship to last for more than just now. Like now is all I really need. And if none of this ever happens again, that's totally fine. I've been finding so much fun stuff to do in my life lately because of that realization that I don't have any sort of control over any of this. And so I can just go fucking live my life. Like there's nothing for anything for me to do besides just experience. Like I was noticing how I've had so many programs running in regards to making sure that I was being the right kind of process for other people, but there's no right kind of process. And all of this conversation, what all of this conversation has been making me realize is that it's not about the conversation, one, and that two, it's really just about taking away all the weight that you have been unnecessarily holding on to during your experience that has been basically shackling you from trying out new things, like not going to your phone whenever you feel something that you might not want to feel, or feel like you need to have some sort of thought that you're holding on to as you're speaking. And it's just recognizing that all of that weight you were carrying, but you don't need to carry, that it's optional, and you can let go of that weight and just be here. Because being here is so much more relaxing. And all of those ideas that you feel like are going to keep if you think all of those ideas are going to keep you safe and secure and certain, they're not. They're ideas that you created as a child or growing up that you feel like colored reality, but they don't necessarily. If you don't let them, you can recognize that you can let go of those colorings and just recognize that there's millions of different ways of looking at things, that there's millions of colors over whatever you're perceiving, and that when you're not holding on to any one of them, you're allowed to experience more color. And that's visually and perceptually how I've been feeling in regards to being here, is that things are just so much easier when I don't feel like I need to maintain some sort of control over how reality is playing out, because I don't have any control of how anything is playing out. And it's just been about recognizing that I don't need to, that all of this can just be fun. Like I don't need to be afraid. I don't need to be afraid, period. I was just fighting myself this entire time, playing boxing with myself. But yeah, I could put down the gloves. That's an option.
Well said. It's so funny how it's like this grand revelation, because I've been going through it too, that I can just show up as myself. Like I can just do that. I can just talk about what I want to talk about. Like that one too, with you mentioned with friends, like bringing up things that you just want to talk about. Like that has been a big one. Even just realizing like, oh, I can talk about something I want to talk about. Like I can kind of lead it in a way, not like be a leader and guide it, but like to some degree, it doesn't always have to be someone else doing it or someone else making the choice or the decision. Like I can make a decision and go with it and run with it. And it's not to say that I haven't made plenty of decisions in my life, but there's been like just a recent realization, like, oh, fuck, like I can make any decision I want and go with it and trust it and run with it and find things out. There doesn't have to be the like, well, what's everyone else doing looking around, like someone's the first one to do something every time something happens, right? Like there's always a first. There's always that crazy ass motherfucker who's doing it a different way. And so if everyone's always constantly fucking looking around all the time, it's just going to perpetuate the same sorts of things. over and over and over, but someone's gonna be the one to be different, even just like walking around, like, if you see everyone rigid and you're also rigid, like you don't have to wait for someone else to not be as rigid or to fucking bounce around a little bit or do whatever, like fucking sing out loud, like do anything, or even just say something, like talk to yourself. Like you don't have to check in with everyone else to see what everyone else is doing. And it's so funny how that's this big, grand, like revelation. But I guess, when you grow up being told what to do, the right way to act, the right way to live, the correct way to think about something, then all of those things get reinforced over and over and over and over. And so, I don't know, in our society, it is kind of like a big revelation. Like you don't have to look around. You can just do what you want to do, live your life how you want to live it without this, relative like medium or moderation or fucking relative meter. Like how close is this to what everyone else is doing? Oh, it's a little far from what everyone else is doing. That's gonna be a little uncomfortable, gonna get some pushback, whatever. It's like, fuck, you can just do that and see what happens, because you don't need, and even that, like, I don't need the validation. I don't even, when I really dig into some concerns that'll still come up and look at them, it's like, no, but I don't care what that person thinks of me. Like, I don't actually give a fuck if that person likes me, but I still have the initial like response, like, oh, I hope that person, or I hope they don't see me in that way or something. But then if I actually look at it, I'm like, wait a second, I don't fucking care about that. It's like an old pattern that comes up based on an assumption, maybe when I did care about things, but when I'm willing to look at it, be like, yeah, but I don't care. Like I'm not trying to be perfect. I'm not trying to say everything super clearly or articulately. Like I'm actually totally cool if I stumble a bunch, because like, who the fuck am I trying to prove anything to? And who am I trying to be perfect for, if not myself, and this idea thinking that that means something, despite it just further distancing yourself from the reality of experience when you do just let go, which does involve falling and stumbling and, messing up and being willing to jump in and be like, oh shit, I don't know what's going on, gaining your bearings, getting a sense for like, of balance, but you got to jump to do that. And so all of these old patterns have been coming up, and it's like, yeah, but I don't give a fuck about that anymore. So I don't have to act in the same way that was curated based on that deep belief of needing people to like me or fearing people not liking me or whatever, because that's not there as much anymore. But some of the behavioral responses still come up, which, they'll always come up to some degree, maybe, no guarantees. But it's not to say that there's anything wrong for them coming up, but then looking at them and realizing, oh, there's no guarantee that doing it in this way is going to guarantee the thing that I thought it would guarantee before. So I don't have to focus on doing it that way anymore. And I can just do it for me, for myself, free in myself, without necessarily holding on to so many of the considerations outside of my own considerations based on my awareness and sensitivity of where I'm at just right now and how I see things.
Well said. It's funny because we often forget that you can go back to seeing things the way you used to just by focusing on them in the way that you used to. Like it's kind of like adults are rarely afraid of the dark, but occasionally an adult will watch a scary movie, right, or hear a scary story, and all of a sudden that adult will fool themselves into being afraid of the dark, just like they did when they were a kid. And it's just damn scary. You're sitting there in your sheets going, what the fuck's that shadow on the wall? And you're right back to being a fucking 6-year-old, and that's exactly what it is. We don't realize it, but we can do that shit with everything. Like the whole spectrum of everything we've experienced is in there, and it's just a matter of looking at it with the same intensity, with the same belief. We can do that. We do that to ourselves more often than we're willing to admit. Jay.
Yeah, like earlier today, on this point, like when I was going through that kind of storm, and all the thoughts racing and everything, I've really been doing a lot of practicing about thoughts themselves, and kind of the way I'm approaching it is kind of any word that comes into my mind. As soon as I notice it's made of words, it's just like, okay, and I almost just kind of laugh and it goes away, and I love it. Like I appreciate it. It's not like I'm like, oh, it's an intrusive, go away words, nothing like that. It's more like, it's thank you, thank you for showing me that I, don't need to do that. Like, it's just nice to notice, that I don't need to think words, I can, and that I can just not. And so when I was feeling and experiencing that whole shitstorm of thought and emotion, and I could feel it in my body, I was not even literally looking at the road. What came to me that stopped it was, I love this. It really was a full acceptance. Like, normally I'd be like trying to make a phone call or get some kind of validation, somehow, like I'm right, or whatever whatever conceptual thoughts I got going on, like, to sort of back that up, you know what I mean, in some kind of a way. But I knew it's just me. Like, there's nobody else but me. So like, I can either experience this shitstorm or I can just not. And so it just went away just like that, like that, like instantly, dude. And it was like, wow, I really know. I know for certain that I don't need anything. I don't need anybody or anything. It's me. And I haven't felt like that in so long, but it's a lot of that is, due to hard ass work, because I'm looking at things like with fucking brutal honesty sometimes, and it takes some brutal honesty to be able to say, like, maybe I don't need to be thinking, like that. That's some level shit that people aren't willing to go to mostly, like, it takes another person to just say, like, my thoughts aren't real. Like, what do you mean? Most people like laugh in your face and think you're bananas, like, but I can attest that they're not necessary. Guarantee that.
Yeah, it's like, sounds like you lost your goddamn mind. It's like, it's in your mind where a lot of that psychological suffering comes from, if not all of it. Would that not mean that maybe losing your mind just a little bit wouldn't be kind of a nice experience from time to time? But it's pinned as this thing that's, oh, don't lose your mind. Oh, you're going crazy, losing your mind. It's like, your mind's where a lot of the shit, the thoughts, the perspective, the judgments, the fears, the worries, the concerns, all that shit is focused from that. Without all of those things, like, yeah, those things are going to come up from time to time, but without the focus on them, like, my experience has shifted drastically without, just from, not from solving anything, not from figuring it out, because there's no way to do that, because it's all just tiny little smidge of a component of the process. It's just a little tiny fragment. So like, it's like having one puzzle. I don't know if we've used this example before, but like, it's one puzzle piece thinking you can figure out the whole puzzle. And it's like, all you're ever looking at is one. Maybe Ray said that before. I feel like I remember it from something, but yeah, it's like one little puzzle piece thinking I'm going to use this to solve the puzzle. It's like, gonna need some more pieces, and even any combination of pieces isn't a guarantee, because it's like a unfinishable puzzle. It like doesn't end up with this nice little curated box like we think it does. And we think, oh, if I have enough thoughts, if I focus on enough thoughts, if I figure out enough thoughts, enough situations, enough things, then my life will be good. My life will be perfect. As opposed to realizing, oh, it's actually the focus on trying to figure out my life that's making it more difficult for me to live. Like, trying to make it perfect is the thing that's causing so much of my suffering. Trying to have the perfect life is actually the thing taking you from the reality of what a quote unquote perfect life could be, which is just actually fucking experiencing your life. Like, that's the closest thing we got to a perfect life, is actually being there for it, as opposed to trying to turn it into, or curate it into, or fit it into some idea of some fucking made up assumption of what I think it should look like, instead of just being there for it and actually seeing it. I'm gonna cough now. Jackie.
Yeah, it's just the devil we know versus the devil we don't. It's like thought, investment in thought is the devil we know, and we torture ourselves constantly. Like, thought, no matter which way you spin it, even if it is positive, it can be flipped on a dime and you can feel like shit about yourself again, so it's like we think we're gaining control by investing in thought and taking it seriously, but in reality we're like, that's us building our prison. The more and more we thought, we're just adding more bricks. Each thought is another brick. And the more thoughts, it's like it's becoming thicker and thicker, and it's harder to see through or like get out of. But yeah, all it just takes is the willingness to have a little separation between thought and me. And it's interesting thinking about how that shift happens, because I think for every single person it's different. I think up until a certain point, we don't know anything else, and we're not encouraged to look anywhere else. We're not encouraged to even entertain that. Like we're saying, people say you lost your mind if you're like, no, my thoughts aren't truth. But yeah, all it takes is that little gap of separation, and you can just drop the weight based on that. It's like, okay, well, I'm just here. I'm just here always. Like the thoughts, I don't know where they are. I don't know what they're talking about necessarily, because none of that is in reality. And yeah, like Jay, like what you were saying, it's funny when you get it. It's funny only when you get it. But before that, it's not, because your thoughts can really throw you for a loop, and they can be really fucking convincing. And even when you do realize that they're not the truth, like they don't go away, and almost like you become more aware of how many of them are there, and like your sensitivity to them almost increases. And that's totally the case in my situation. Like I think I was in denial of a lot of things I was thinking about, or like the thoughts that were subconsciously running my life. I didn't even realize they were there. And now it's like I can realize when I'm doing them, because I can step out of them for a second, but it's almost, I'm like resistant to seeing them. I'm noticing like certain ones are like, wow, that's deep. And it's something that it's a struggle for me not to judge them on top of that. So it's like a practice of just finding acceptance on a moment to moment basis, of being like, okay, I don't have to change this. There's nothing necessarily wrong about this thought coming up, even though everything in my conditioning is telling me that there is, or like the way that I want to see myself, or the way that I want to see the world. And it can be tough to let that go. But that's the process. And it's not about things becoming easier, because it never does. But like what you find with doing it is that you're more capable more capable of handling it than you ever thought you were. And yeah, just that faith in yourself. And it builds with practice. It's like the more times you throw yourself off a cliff, the more comfortable it becomes, or I don't know, it's just you have more context in doing that. Like people who are like cliff divers, I'm sure they experience a little bit less of that, the fear and like catastrophizing when they jump off a cliff, but they're still jumping off a cliff. There's always going to be that uncertainty there. But the more you step into it, you really realize that there's nothing to fear. Like the fear is the only thing you're afraid of, but it's okay to be afraid. And like I've said that to people, like it's okay to feel sad, or it's like okay to be afraid. And like people are just so resistant to that, but it's like that resistance is what's causing their suffering. That's literally it. It's just your resistance to whatever the fuck.
Yeah. Yeah. And like that fear of being afraid too. Like the idea that, oh, if I'm afraid, I'm doing something wrong. But when you're good with being afraid, when you're like, yeah, I'm afraid, and there's nothing wrong with that, that's okay. Like then it totally shifts, that there's not that tension, resistance, fight towards any experience. And even with the with the deeper things that come up, like being willing to look at those, because I've had similar stuff, like similar things come up, and I'm like, I didn't think that that was even close to being in there, but being able to look at it then allows you to shift that perspective on it. And really, like, when you do that, it's just how relaxed you can be in the face of it. Like when we were talking about this maybe like a month ago, and I was going on about like certain deeper things coming up and like dealing with them and like facing them. And I had this sort of perspective, like as things come up, I got to do something about it. I gotta, this deep fear, I gotta face it ASAP. And and I think Ray said something along the lines of like, no, you just have to relax. Like, and I've realized that those fears, they were almost like reasons that I tensed up. They were like reasons to tense up. And because I had an underlying belief about what it meant about me, that I was something that could be impacted by that thing happening. And so as they come up again, it's almost just an opportunity to relax in the face of them, not in the face of, whatever situation, hypothetical situation playing out, like, I gotta face it and deal with it and relax in it. It's like, no, you just have to relax right now. Like that's coming up. It's the fear that's always in the way. It's not even like the things happening. It's our concern about them, our fear of them. So if you can relax in the face of certain deeper fears coming up and not even doing anything about them, because that's always been a thing for me, is like, I gotta do something to overcome this thing. But that's just another means of thinking that I'm going to be almost like this thought that I'm going to be more for overcoming it or for conquering my fear, and just another way of like building myself up, as opposed to just, no, just you can just relax. You can just relax right now. That thing won't have the impact. It doesn't have the impact. It's not something you have to worry about happening, because whether it happens or it doesn't mean something about you. And I'm just realizing how much none of this is about me becoming, the perfect version of myself. It's just about being myself right now. Like I'm not doing all of these things to be relaxed so that I can do anything so seamlessly and perfectly. It's like, no, we're all just going through our stuff. Like we're the highest, all that higher self bullshit. Like you're your highest self right now, just going through the things that you're going through. It's not in order to become a better version of yourself, a more relaxed version. It's like there are options that you have at your disposal right now. And there's certain assumptions that get in the way of being able to relax right now. But that's all it is just you going through it right now, things coming up, realizing, I don't have to tense up because of that anymore. And then just relaxing. And then all of a sudden it's like, here I am, and I can do things with this right now. And I don't have to focus on those things in the same way anymore.
I got to tell you, and again, this is just because I've said it so many times myself. I love it every time we say something along the lines of like, I'm just coming to really grasp this, or I'm just starting. It's just starting to dawn on me that this is the case, and it's because, and it's so funny because there's been so many other times where you said the same thing about a relatively similar insight, and it's just so funny that we always end up going, now I'm getting it. Now I'm getting it, instead of it being this one long process of getting it all the fucking time, right? It's like, now I'm getting it. It's like, no, you just became suddenly more aware of what you've been getting this whole time, right? And you could have only become more aware from all the other times you've had moments of awareness. Again, we oscillate between clarity and confusion because it is a giant insight that we're learning that requires us to understand clarity and confusion. So I just think that's really funny. Like we're always just like, now. It's like this whole time you couldn't have got here otherwise. I mean, shit in your pants was a road to enlightenment.
Did do that in first grade. So afraid of shitting in a stall. I've probably told this story before, but yeah, just straight up shit my pants in a computer lab. Walked around in that, literally in shit for the rest of the day.
Dualistic unity. It's all about going through the shit.
Amen. Amanda.
I love it. I absolutely love it. I love this shit. Let me tell you people. We get into some good shit. We talk about some bad shit, when we're going through shit. It's just, oh my goodness, I love it. And it made me think of just the cycle between the emotion and the story, and how the story can inspire the emotion, or the story is inspired by the emotion and that's what creates it. And then every time you tell the story, it just reinforces the emotion that inspired the creation of the story. So let's say I was super scared about walking down a particular street, and because I was scared initially because it was an unknown street, then I came up with this story, oh, I could get mugged down that street. And then every time I see that street, I would tell the same story about how I could get mugged down that street. That would inspire the fear. And so it made me think of how the stories are so tied to emotions, because it's usually an emotion that inspires the story to begin with. And I was just noticing how instantaneous the connection between when you tell the story again. And it's like, of course, it has such a great impact because I'm the author. I'm the author of that story. And so I'm the one who pulled from that inspiration. And so every time I tell my spooky stories, I'm going to get the most scared. But then I forget that I'm the one who made the story, and that usually there was nothing besides a hypothetical that I was using as a brick in building that story house. And then if I took a closer look, it's all smoke and mirrors. And so at any point, there was nothing to worry about, but it almost made it easier to just avoid the street, right? Avoid the opportunity, because I couldn't handle the danger. Instead of calling my bluff and going down it and just being like, it's just any other street. Anything could happen on any other street. When I went to the first retreat, I came back home and my mom was like, oh my God, I was so worried about you. I was like, Mommy, I've done, in my opinion, I was like, I've done way crazier things than fly to another country to meet people that I met online. And that tells you something about like the way that I scale crazy for me. I'm like, meeting a group of strangers in another country, that's nothing. It was just regular Tuesday, Mom. I was like, she's like, I was so worried. I was like, why? I was like, I could get run over right in front of your house. I could get run over right in front of your house on that very street. I could also fall down the flight of stairs in your house down to the basement and snap my neck. If something's going to happen, it can happen anywhere. I'm not going to be scared of a place because of something that could happen, when the coulds have no limit in terms of geography. Something could happen everywhere. Something does happen everywhere. Does it happen to me? Does it happen to you? No, it doesn't. But it's more so just paying attention. I was having a different chat with a friend who was expressing anger because someone had, just made the night all about them. And my friend was like, how dare she? And I was like, you realize that has nothing to do with us, right? Like, her making the night all about her was all about her insecurity of not being seen, of not being valuable, of not being, whatever the fear was in her head. I was like, it has nothing to do. And although I can understand why you're angry, it's just a matter of paying attention. And the person had gotten aggressive and wanted to start fights. And I was like, and the friend was just like, oh, well, it's like, we should be safe at a birthday party, or we should know, like it's guaranteed, maybe not safe, but like that the night, like good times are guaranteed. I was like, as much as I understand like birthday code, like there's like a bro code, there's like a birthday code, right? You're supposed to, for the most part, we all have fun. You go there with good spirits and you go there with good intentions for the most part, but there is no guarantee, and we don't need it to be guaranteed, because as long as everyone is paying attention, then you can see when the ship is veering closer to the coral reef, and not get angry that the coral reef is there, but just by paying attention, naturally just make that quick pivot, and then just get it back onto the current, back towards the waves. It's not to be upset that there's coral reefs there, that there may be a tsunami, that it may be overcast, where we don't see the stars, where we can't navigate. It's like, shit's gonna happen, but you don't. I used to get very angry, and it's only because I didn't like the surprise of uncertainty. And so when I would have something would come out of nowhere, I'd be like, what the fuck, man? Like how dare this shit happen to me? Like, I have my plans, I do my work. This is some bullshit, universe. And it really was just because I was surprised that something didn't go my way. And how silly is that for me to think of, or at least it feels so silly now, that I thought that like everything was owed to me. And it really was because I thought I couldn't handle things just being unpredictable, but they've always been unpredictable. I have never known. And the biggest realization for me was just that I don't need to understand, and that I never have. I never have. I am always guessing. And that is totally okay, because as long as I'm paying attention, I don't have to be in fright or in panic. I don't have to be on high alert. I don't have to be like looking at people and always thinking that something's going to go wrong. No, I can just be relaxed and attentive. And just with that relaxed attention, I can always just notice when things are veering in any single direction. And then I can always make a decision of whether I want to at least make an attempt. And the attempt has no guarantee, but I don't need it to, because if the first attempt doesn't work, quote unquote, in whatever context that means, then we just make a different attempt and we make other choices. And it reminds me of like the process to jumping. Like when you think you're standing flat on the ground, both feet are flat on the ground, you don't think that's part of the jump, but it is. Because if you weren't flat on the ground, you wouldn't be able to build momentum to then lift off. But everybody thinks that the jump is all about being in the air. And it's just as much about being stable on the ground before you lift off into that jump. That's just as important. And it's just as much a part of the jump, and just as much as coming down is. It doesn't stop. It's continuous. Just like our learning, it's not instantaneous all the time. It's usually cumulative, and you only had that realization that seems so instant, like, oh, now I get it. You usually only feel that way because you've spent so many hours building up to that fucking point where you could have that realization. So even learning is a lifetime process, and it's so beautiful, because this moment you are the classroom, and it's more than you being the student and the teacher. You're the entire classroom where all the learning happens. And the classroom is just always changing before us. You never have to leave. But if you pay attention, you'd be surprised what you might be able to teach yourself.
Amen. Fuck yeah. I was thinking about fear and like how much of a distraction it is. Like it's just a distract. If you're afraid of something happening, it's just like you're focusing on that as opposed to focusing on the situation. So if you want to be safe, then not being afraid, obviously easier said than done. But like that's the best way to stay safe, is just continuing to be aware of where you're at. But then that last point made me think of fear even as like standing flat-footed on the ground when you're jumping. Like, it's not to say that there's anything wrong with it. It's a component of you and process. It's like a consideration, just a consideration that then we pin as like not being a bad thing happening, right? It's like, this is a neutral consideration that then I pin this meaning like, oh, but if it happens, that'll be bad. And I definitely know that, as opposed to it just being a component of that process. Oh, it's a consideration. Oh, I don't have to focus on it. If I do focus on it, it's going to take me away from the situation that's happening, make it actually more likely to happen, like more likely for the fear to happen if I continue to maintain, that focus, that attention on the fear. And so letting go of that, or at least being willing to realize like, oh, I don't know that. Oh, it's not likely, and it's going to be only more likely by me focusing on it happening. Then I can maintain my awareness right now. And that's the best thing that I can do. It's not about getting rid of the potential for the fear or the situation to come up, because any situation is always going to have the opportunity to be afraid. Like any situation. I've had plenty of times where I'm super high walking around maybe an unfamiliar area, and all the considerations come up, and it's like, oh my God, like, oh, some of the fucking stories that my mind has come up with when I'm really baked walking around. Like I noticed two people looking at me at once, and I'm like, oh my God, they're plotting against me. They've been following me. How long have they been following me? Oh my God, that one just looked at me. They're all in on it. They're all in it. They've caught me. They know.
He's on to us, guys.
They know. Oh God. Yeah, and here I am surrounded by a bunch of people. Yeah, focus on me, catching me, getting me. No, it's but anyway.
Hey man, I warned you in the Freemasonry episode. I could be up to something shady this whole fucking time.
Dude, don't worry. When I've been really high, some thoughts have come up about Ray too. Like, I trust Ray a lot. maybe I should trust him a little less. He's taking me at all these retreats.
I need
Yeah,
some
no.
fucking lightning on the green screen behind me here.
Yeah. No, don't worry. It's come up about like I don't know if people realize, I'm sure I'm certainly not alone. Like the extremes of hypotheticals, when I look at it, oh, that shit goes crazy. Like crazy ass shit. That then I've been like, that because that is a potential, like infinite potential. Those fears are in potential. And especially when I'm super baked, it's like, that is a potential. Whereas when I'm more sober, it's like, yeah, but likelihood, blah, blah, blah. It's not looked at as much. But then when it is open table, it's like, that could happen. Like theoretically, everyone in the entire universe could be plotting against me to figure me out. And in a sense, like, I don't
Quite
know.
equally, though, everybody in the universe could just be you, as a reminder of how much you are. It could just all be you looking at yourself. And that's the point of being willing to go down those roads, regardless of how scary they might be, is the recognition you don't know. And if you don't know, then it's worth looking. And the one thing that nobody really wants to look at, I've said it before, it's the basis for this conversation for me, is that you don't know there's anything other than you. You don't know. You don't know. And you could be, well, yeah, people and stuff, and you could do the same thing in a dream. It's still all you. It's still all you. And unless you're willing to look at it, you can't see both sides of the coin that make the complete picture. You can't see yourself in the universe as well as the universe within you. You can't see the paradox unless you're willing to accept that they're all possible. All those perceptions are possible. And all pointing at what is without ever actually pinpointing what is with one single perception.
All said, Jazz.
Yeah, I find it interesting how many perceptions you can see when you're allowing yourself to see anyone without feeling like you need to run away from them. Because I find that the more that you either run to a perception or from a perception, you're spending a lot of time in your head and not paying attention to what is happening. And so the more that you pay anyone attention too much, the more that you spend too much attention on any one perception, the less you're paying attention to what is happening. And so while it is cool that you can process so many perceptions, it is also wise to keep in mind that you don't have to take any of them too seriously, because they're all just like considerations. And so the less weight that you give any particular one of them, the more you recognize that, yeah, they're all in potential, and make decisions from there and do things from there. And so I find that action just happens without feeling like I need to be getting myself to somewhere. Because I was noticing as well with this conversation was that I was feeling like I was refining my process. I was a self-improvement project that I was working on, and it was taking away from my own experience outside of the conversation, where it felt like the conversation was the point, but not my experience, rather than the other way around, where my experience is the point, the conversation informs it, but the point for me is to experience all of it. It's not to refine my process to a point where I'm not feeling certain particular emotions or particular perceptions, or somehow making particular perceptions more likely, as if that's possible, as if I have any control over any of that. And recognizing that I don't have to be the teacher, I can be the whole classroom. I love that, Amanda, because I was thinking about that recently as well, as how I have been either looking at myself as the student or as the teacher, depending on, first of all, where I am, but also second of all, how I'm perceiving myself to be processing the current situation. And so for me, it was a lot about getting somewhere in regards to how I was perceiving myself and other people, and recognizing that, oh yeah, I'm not improving myself. When I get out of the way, the process just becomes easier and less weighted. And so I don't have to get in there, start tweaking, make sure that all the systems and engines are working while the car is literally on the road going 60 kilometers per hour, and I'm not looking out the windshield because I'm making sure that all of these things, the wiper fluid is all full, there's gas in the tank. Meanwhile, the car is just going full speed. I'm not looking out the windshield. I don't know where I'm going. I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just making sure that all systems are functional and working. But we do that. Like, we do exactly that. We're just like making sure that the system is working completely fine. Meanwhile, we have so many programs running to make sure that the system is running fine that the system can't even do what you would like to do, like just draw. Like, how many of you viewers can just draw, just like without feeling like you're judging yourself, without feeling like you need to draw something good? Just draw. Because as kids, we used to do that. We used to color, we used to draw, we used to do so many things without feeling like we needed it to be anything, or without feeling like we needed to get anywhere. We were just doing it for the sake of doing it, because it was just, yeah, it just was. That's it. And now we're just doing things because we feel like we want to have more fun, or be someone who is looked at in a certain way, or feel like we need to get something that is not here right now. And it's all just running away from here. And that's why there's so much weight. That's why there's so much resistance to what is happening, because I feel like there are ways of running through away from here, but there aren't. I have an option here, whether I want to spend it in my head or if I want to just continue moving forward without feeling like I need this process to look like anything, any particular way. Because the more I'm holding on to those ideas, the more programs I have running while I experience life. And the more I recognize that all those programs are just taking away from my experience, because they're limiting my ability to be here, which is the only place I really can be. Like, I'm always here. So if I'm just here, but with a bunch of programs running, then are those programs useful? Like, are those programs helping me? No, I'm just going to be uncertain the entire time. There's no conclusion that I can ever reach to that will help me gain any sort of certainty about what is happening, or if I'm alone or not. Like, I don't have any clue about what is happening. And so the most I can do is just pay attention to where I'm at without feeling like I need so many tabs running in my browser on figuring out, Google searching what life is all about, and how do I meditate to become better? How can I pay more attention to the here and now? It's just like, just do it. There's no how. You just do it. That's all you need to do. And it's like, when you're doing it, it just helps itself. It's like, the more attention you pay to your experience, the more you're able to learn and grow from it. And the more attention you're paying to the thoughts in your head, the less attention you're able to pay to the experience. So you're going to grow and change either way. That's going to happen. It's about how much stuff you're putting in the way of that happening. How much weight are you adding to the point where you're limiting your change rather than allowing yourself to recognize that you are changing, that you're not changing from one thing to another. You're always changing. And so the less idea you have about yourself, the more you're just flowing into whatever it is, the whole classroom, right? You're just experiencing everything and allowing yourself to experience everything, and not feeling like you need to judge it or feel like you need to make it better, feel like you need to get to the end of this process so you can be perceived in a certain way, because that's all life is. Life is continuous process. There's nowhere to get to. There's no point where you take a snapshot and then you're like, this is me, I've made it now, or anything like that, or like, I'm gonna make it. I'm gonna become better, I'm gonna do it one day. No, it's just about experiencing.
Because that's what you have. That's what's real. That's the funniest part about this shit. Like, it's so funny because to me, and I've had this argument, it's like, well, some thoughts are true. It's like, depends what you mean. Like, look, the sun is coming up. It's like, okay, you could say that's a thought, but that's more of a recognition. So not all thoughts are thoughts. Some things are just your brain going, look, that's happening, right? But when we think a thought, it's like, oh, look, the sun's coming up and I'm terrified. It's because God is angry with me. You know, like, there's a thought about you. So when we're talking about thinking, we're talking about thinking about this fictional thing that you consider to be yourself. We're talking about doubt. We're talking about self-judgment. We're talking about this fixation on how you identify, how you think about yourself. It's not thought in itself. Like you can walk down the street, have a thought about something, go, that's funny, and just let it go. You can walk down the street and have a thought about, wow, that fence is broken. Somebody's going to be like, was that thought not true? It's like, well, it depends. What's your definition of broken? And what's the point of the fence? Like, it's never as simple as we think. It's never this one thing. There, I thought that's it. It's like, you could think about that in 1,000 different ways. And so that's all we mean, is just understanding that we settle on a certain thought because it's convenient. That fence is broken is a convenient way of identifying that I can get through the fence if there's something on the other side I want. What I'm saying is that it's just problem solving, as opposed to, that fence is broken and I'm a piece of shit for letting it get into such disrepair. And all of that thinking is just superfluous. It does nothing except allow you to fixate on this fictional you and judge your progress, because the alternative would be just continuing on through or by the fence.
Yeah, without fucking needing as you go to have some idea of how it's going or trying to maintain, like even just the idea that we need an idea of how something's going, like how much that's clung to. Like I got to figure out this situation, how I fit into it, how it's going, what it's going to lead to, what it means, what everyone else is thinking about it. Like you don't need to do any of that. Like you don't actually have to figure out any situation. Like you are within as doing, being the process of everything being figured out all the time as you're going. And so all you got to keep doing is paying attention, because this is the spot that you got in the car analogy we were having some fun about, just with the focusing on that, like the absurdity in looking at all of the things like, ooh, is my engine still running? It's like, oh, the car's moving. So like, you don't have to check it right now. Let's check in on that later, or maybe not at all. And we'll find out, something starts sputtering, then check it, instead of, oh, is it broken now? Is it broken now? Got to make sure it's not broken now. What if something's tweaked? Maybe it'll break. And then it's like you miss the whole drive. You miss everything. You miss your entire experience focusing on how it's going. Like, how is my experience going, as opposed to being it going? Like you can't know how anyway. You can't know how it's going ever anyway. So yeah, it's not really worth focusing all that goddamn attention on it.
And you might think it is, and you're going to want to think it is over and over and over again, because the alternative is faith. The alternative is nothing except you moving forward. That's really why we dodge it. That's really why we don't like it. It's because surely some thoughts got to fucking pay off. No, I'm sorry. Not unless you're using it super delicately and with a certain degree of skepticism. At least then you're using thought with awareness, as opposed to using thought to supplement awareness. Jackie.
Yeah, this whole conversation around like hesitation is really relevant to what I'm experiencing with like my yoga teacher training, because like our teacher kind of just threw us in and like had us teaching starting very early on, but just on Saturday was the first time I taught like everybody. And so that was an interesting experience. And I felt like literally I was driving the car of the class and looking at what was happening under the hood, like being like constantly looking down at the book, being like, okay, am I cueing these correctly? And meanwhile, I'm not even looking at all of the people who are practicing, and like I'm not even tailoring my cues to what they're showing in their bodies. Like that's such an important part of being a teacher, is paying attention to your students and the experience that they're having. But when I'm so caught up in how they're perceiving me, or if I'm being a good teacher, if this is going well or whatever, like all the little nitty gritty details, like I'm not teaching to the full extent that I could. It's just hyper fixating on ourselves and what it means about us rather than the entire experience. And those are the best teachers that like don't take themselves so seriously, or like, are they just feel less concerned? Because you can feel when a teacher is like, and like, I've noticed that with, you know, when other people that are in the course with me are teaching, it's like, we don't judge other people the way we judge ourselves at all, you know, and we can see in other people when they're getting in their own way, but necessarily we can't really recognize it in the moment in ourselves, or at least we think that's what we should be doing. But it's so clear on the opposite end that's like, no, you got this. Like, it's just you hitting the brakes on yourself. Like, you're slowing your own progress by judging yourself every step of the way, when like that judgment is just based on the idea of what you think this process should be, and trying to work backwards from that, when no, like, this process of us becoming yoga teachers is unfolding in the moment. And the way that we learn is just by getting it out, by doing it. There's no other way to learn besides just doing it. And we get in our way so goddamn much. And yeah, it's just moment to moment, having the willingness to drop whatever thoughts are giving you a false sense of certainty about what's happening. Because once you recognize you can never know, then it's like, there's no point in doing that. And it just saps your energy. It's like the energy that you could be directing outwards into creating or expressing whatever it is you're expressing, you're using just to fog your lens, or cover your eyes, or whatever, and it's just getting in the way. I'm interested to see what Amanda put in the chat now. So I'm gonna pass it along. But yeah, no, that's so real. And it's also not judging myself for doing that when I'm doing that, because it's just doing it again.
I find it especially interesting because the practice of yoga is literally the practice of unfolding physically, breathing through it, and trying to be as attentive as possible. So it's a physical symbolism of what we could be practicing all the time. In the same way that, you know, life can be meditation, life can be yoga. You can be that attentive to each and every movement. You can be that attentive to each and every step of your life. It's not just about practicing yoga. That was just one practice of unfolding and watching yourself do so. We've got about 5 minutes left here. I'm going to pass it over to Amanda.
I love it, because we talked about how they say losing the mind is a bad thing, but then mindfulness is the goal, to be so attentive. And that's what it's described, or that's the way that it's labeled. And when I think about the process of learning, I think about how in the beginning, the labels are super useful, because at that point, you know, you're not able to absorb all the information of all the intricate pieces of the vehicle, of what it takes to drive, of what it's like to turn on the car, to put the key in the ignition, to put on your seatbelt, to change the mirrors, you don't know any of that. And so in the beginning, I think the book is important. And Jackie, when you're talking about your class, it's like, you know, you were looking down, and you could just as easily, the option is to pick up the book and walk around with the book. To walk around with it, to still be okay with the fact that in the beginning, it's okay to rely on that resource, and to integrate the resource into the practicing of developing your attention, developing your eye. And because once you're an expert, then you're like, all right, you're going to move this shigamagig to this jigaba spot, you know, and you're like using all this gibberish. And it's because you're just pointing to things, because you know where everything is, you know where all the intricate nuances of the car, of the body are. And so you don't need the labels, you don't need the book in that same way. But in the beginning, I definitely appreciate the labels. And especially when I'm training somebody that's new, where I'm going to be like, okay, we're going to stick this and we're going to point this into that direction. And then they're going to be like, what? It's like, we're going to point part A into the west direction. And there's like, and then it gives them a reference point, because and when you're learning tools, templates, all of that are excellent. Thoughts, another tool. And it's just when you think that you need the tool that it becomes a crutch. But technically, all crutches are just tools that just became over relied on. But it's not that the crutch is itself a bad thing when it's just utilized as a tool that's there to support you, because you can make it work with or without any tool. I have strung together a pair of pants with a shoelace, and that was my belt, right? And to someone, they'd be like, I could never, you know, and it's like, hey, my pants were kept up. I could care less what you think about the tool. The tool was there. It did the job. And so, but someone else can judge the tool, or someone else could be like, oh, I could never think of that. And it's like, you could and you can. And there are so many things. And I think about being a kid, I really appreciate how much we utilized our imagination. There was no distractions in terms of a smartphone that brought you to a social media website that brought you a million examples of things that looked better than what you thought you were. And when I was a kid, it was just us. I got to be back before the streetlights are on. When we are in the living room is all of a sudden the vast seas, the couch is the ship. Ahoy, mateys! There, you know, you couldn't be anywhere but the moment, because all you had was your imagination, which was your tool for utilizing that moment. But a lot of times we forget that imagination is always available to us, and we can always create. So I appreciate just all the experiments in reality, in the name of science, in the name of attentiveness, in the name of fucking the experience, because we are the experience, and it's pretty fucking epic.
Agreed. This has been a hell of a roundtable. I'm going to pass it over to Andrew, but I just wanted to say thank you to everybody who could participate. Thank you for everyone who could listen. Do join us in an upcoming retreat if you can. We not only have the Netherlands, but we have Virginia Beach, California. There's a bunch of shit coming, so do check us out on the website. Join us on Patreon in 15 minutes if you can.
Yes, this has been a lot of fun, as always. I appreciate everyone for joining the roundtable. And anyone listening, if you haven't joined the roundtable, join us. They're a blast. They're a ton of fun. And sometimes you forget you're even on a roundtable, and we're having a lot of fun. And you get to see the chat, because we've been having a lot of fun in there. Man has been posting some great Halloween themed, very inappropriate jack-o'-lantern memes in there. So we're having fun talking about those, as well as the conversation that you're all hearing. So appreciate everyone for tuning in. Hope to see some of you on Patreon in 15 minutes, and we'll talk to you some other time.